I want to introduce Helen Hutchison from the California State League of Women Voters. And Helen is a former president of the league and led the redistricting along with a co-person, Chris Carson. Helen and Chris led the redistricting efforts of the league after the 2020 census. And Helen's going to, she's been a longtime league member in many states and many cities in California. And she's going to do some introductory remarks, and then we're going to have a conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Helen.
Thanks, Marion. As Marion just said, I'm going to do a really brief introduction and then open it up for discussion. So I want to start by talking about the California Voting Rights Act and what it is. The California Voting Rights Act was signed into law in 2002, and it builds on the Federal Voting Rights Act, which was enacted in 1965 and has been updated several times since then and kind of gutted by the Supreme Court in some ways too. But meanwhile, the CVRA, the California Voting Rights Act, provides that at-large elections can't be used in local elections if they dilute the votes of a minority group. So if in effect that group is unable to elect candidates of their choice or otherwise influence the outcome of the election, then you can't use at-large elections. And a voter or group of voters can sue to enforce the California Voting Rights Act. Over the years since it passed, there have been an increased number of lawsuits and complaints based on the CVRA. So as a result, more and more local governments are now using district elections. And then whether a jurisdiction engages in districting, so establishing districts for the very first time, or redistricting, which happens after a census, the criteria for drawing the district lines are the same. You need to have essentially equal population. You need to try to keep communities together. I mean, those are about the same, whether it's districting or redistricting. The requirements for public participation and outreach may differ a little bit. So what's happening in Pleasant Hill? There is a threat of a lawsuit by Kevin Shankman. He is an attorney that's filed suits successfully throughout the state for the CVRA. And he, it's kind of a Shankman, he's making his living doing these lawsuits. So what are the options for the city? One is to allow the suit to play out in the courts. This is costly and it's time consuming, and looking at the experience of other cities is that the likelihood is that it would fail. The city would fail and still be required to do district elections. The other option is to adopt a plan now to change to district elections. That avoids the cost of the attorneys and the distraction of the lawsuit. There still are expenses because you still have to do the outreach. You have to have support for the districting process, and there are professionals that need to be hired to advise and help draw maps. If they do that, then there's two options within that. The drawing of the district lines, the districting, can be done either by the current council members or by an independent commission that is charged with that process. The best practices for redistricting would say that it would be best for the city to establish an independent commission a commission that would be completely independent of the current council and fully empowered to draw the lines. And I'll note that it can be really difficult for incumbents to give up that power. So it may be best practice, but it's not something that many incumbents are happy to embrace. So then the final piece I want to talk about quickly is how to advocate. If you have an opinion about what they should be doing, you need to call and email your council members. And I think that we're going to see a link about how to do that in the chat, I hope. You can speak at a council meeting if this is on the agenda. You can talk to your friends and neighbors and get them to join you in at least emailing the council members, maybe calling, maybe actually speaking at the meeting. And then use social media to highlight this issue. You can tag the city council members as you do that. So what do you say? You say who you are, what your connection to the community is. So, I'm Helen Hutchison. I live in Pleasant Hill, which is not the case right now, but then tell them what you want to happen. Tell them why you care, what it is you care about, and why you think this is important. And beyond that, you can also advocate for an independent commission. So you can advocate, you can say you want them to avoid the lawsuit, just adopt a plan to change to district elections. And then if you want to, you can also say it, and please make it an independent commission that draws the lines. And with that, I think it's time for questions.